What's up, guys? I'm LQ. This is the LQ Review. Thank you so much for joining me right here at my YouTube channel. This is where we talk about all the geeky, nerdy stuff that we love to talk about. Movies, video games, comic books, and TV shows. And right now I'm going to do a movie retrospective. Let's talk about an old movie. Let's talk about the 1983 movie, The Day After. Alright, I'd never seen this before. I hadn't. But I'm a teacher. I teach American history, I teach American government, and I teach geography and economics. And I've never seen this before. I'm teaching the Cold War right now to my students. And when I was teaching about the Cold War and doing my research, I always like to do my research to make sure that I'm giving my kids the most up-to-date facts possible. So while I'm doing my research, I do a little bit of reading about this movie. Now, I knew this movie existed, and I knew what it was. I just never watched it. So this time I decided, hey, you know what? I'm a history buff. Let's watch this movie. And so I did. I watched The Day After. Now, for those who don't know, The Day After is a movie that came out in 1983 while we were in the waning days of the Cold War, but we were still, 7, 8 years away from the Cold War ending. We were about 6 years from the Berlin Wall coming down, and maybe 7 years, maybe, before the Cold War was officially declared over. Some people look at the Berlin Wall as being that ending. Other people think it happened, the ending was a little bit later. Whatever the case may be, we were in the waning days of the Cold War, but we were also at this time period where we were very much afraid of nuclear warfare. A lot of people in the world felt like nuclear war was an inevitability and that it was going to be the end of humanity. I teach my students about a concept called MAD, M-A-D, called mutually assured destruction, meaning that the Soviet Union and the United States both had nuclear warheads, but neither one would fire them because it would be mutually assured destruction. Both sides would be destroyed because United States and Russia, they had enough nuclear warheads stockpiled to destroy the world over like 3 or 4 times. So both sides had nuclear warheads, but neither side wanted to fire them. Except for Douglas MacArthur. Douglas MacArthur wanted to drop nuclear warheads on China. He did. He wanted to. if he would have been given the green light, he would have been piloting that plane himself. All right, are we over Beijing? Drop that bomb. He would have. All right. So, The Day After is a movie. It's a propaganda piece. It's an anti-war, anti-nuclear nuclear race war, anti-armament. It was that type of propaganda film. It was an anti-nuclear, anti-race war, not race war as in, African Americans versus white people, but anti-arms race war. Anti-arms race war propaganda piece. And the movie it was directed by Nicholas Meyer of Star Trek 2 and Star Trek 3, which are 2 of my favorite Star Trek movies, so that's great. So Nicholas Meyer, he directs the movie we follow the lives of these people, and then about halfway through the movie, the nuclear warheads get dropped. Mankind is essentially obliterated. In the process of a blink of an eye, mankind is essentially destroyed. Society sees its downfall. People survive. That's why it's called The Day After, because it is only the lucky ones get incinerated in the nuclear blast. The rest will have to survive to the day after. Yeah, it was a movie made in 1983 for TV. It was made for TV. So the production values were not really great on this. What they did get, though, was that they did get some top-tier talent. Like I said, Nicholas Meyer directed. You had Steve Guttenberg starring in it. You had John Lithgow starring in it. You had some very famous people in this movie. At least very famous at the time, who starred in this movie. And about halfway through, we see the destruction of mankind. Like I said, some people survive, but in all essence, it's the destruction of mankind. And given the production values, given the time that this movie was made in 1983, it was still very vivid. it was still, I mean, I got to give them that. It was very vivid imagery that really sticks with you. And that it did. That imagery stuck with me. And then after the drums were dropped, the nuclear fallout and the way that was affecting people, that stuck with me too. The imagery there. So it did that very effectively. But that's what it was supposed to do. That was the point of the movie, was to scare people. The point of the movie was to scare people into being pro pro disarmament, pro nuclear disarmament. That was the purpose of this movie. That's what was made. That's why it was put out, to scare people into being for nuclear disarmament. And I think for the most part it worked. You know, I read stories about the night that it came out in 1983. The streets were empty, as everybody was home watching The Day After. It was one of those iconic television moments that everybody tuned into. Everybody watched it. People watched it with their kids. And then they had discussions about nuclear disarmament. They had discussions about war. They had discussions about life and death. This was one of those moments that families sat down to watch the destruction of mankind. The problem is that the movie itself was incredibly boring. So, the middle of the movie, when all the stuff goes down, imagery that sticks with you. And then the movie, before the first hour and like the last 30 minutes or so, it's all really boring stuff. Very slow moving, very meandering, a little preachy, and just not very good. So I get the reason why this movie exists. Now, I was 2 years old when this movie came out. I was born in 1980, but when the movie came out, I was 2 years old. I had not yet turned 3. So I don't have any memories of this movie or the way that it impacted culture. I do remember when the Berlin Wall came down and how big and significant of a deal that was, and I was only 9. I was only 9, and I still remember just how that resonated through my family and how that resonated through the people that I knew. I still remember that. That was how big of a deal the Berlin Wall coming down was. But yeah, The Day After was not a good movie. It was very boring, very meandering. The acting, even though they got top-notch talent involved, the acting was a little made for TV-ish. The production values obviously were, even though they put a lot of money clearly into those shots of the nuclear bombs going off, because that imagery was again very vivid and very even shaking. The rest of the movie had that made for TV quality feel to it. So yeah, you know what? The Day After is one of those interesting times in our history where a movie had a cultural impact on politics. Because I definitely think that it made people, I think that the movie definitely made people more likely to be anti-nuclear arms and pro-disarmament. And it worked to that end. It worked. This movie also saw a bit of a increase in anti-capitalism, though, in America. I remember that a college professor did an interview about this movie where he was talking about how, we need to find a way to stop war from happening. And one of those ways of stopping war from happening is to stop capitalism. Obviously, I disagree with that. I'm a pro-capitalist guy. But I would be lying if I said that there wasn't a certain sense of anti-capitalism that was fostered by this movie. Overall, though, definitely an interesting cultural study looking at The Day After. Not a good movie, very resonant imagery, not a good movie, but definitely interesting cultural components that took place here. I remember I saw a news article about The Day After. They actually reported on it the next day. That's how culturally impactful it was. And they actually had cameras in Times Square while the movie was on. And they was like, Times Square is empty because everybody's at home watching The Day After. That's the type of film this was. It was that socially relevant that people watched. People were bored for an hour and 40 minutes, and they got 20 minutes of horribly terrifying imagery. So, yep, it was definitely something that I'm glad that I watched. glad that I spent time in, but I don't know that I'll ever watch it again because it was so boring. So, have you seen The Day After, 1983 made for TV propaganda piece? Let me know in the comments down below what you thought of it. Did you like it? Maybe you liked it. Maybe you're a little bit older than me and you remember seeing it on TV. Let me know any experiences you had if you're a little bit older than me and you remember it. I would love to hear those experiences. So, thank you so much for joining me here at the OK Review. Make sure you subscribe to my channel, and until next time, we'll see you guys later.